Dunkirk, a World War II film written, produced, and directed by one of my favorite directors, Christopher Nolan. The film follows the real-life event where British forces are cut off and surrounded by the Germans in Dunkirk, France, and the British military, as well as a bunch of activated civilian boats, work to evacuate approximately 400,000 soldiers from the beaches and the harbor at Dunkirk. Hello, and welcome to Exploring Cinema. Let's get right into the review. As far as the characters, we aren't really given anything about anyone, and that's because you don't get that cliche scene or scenes in war films where people take a break from the fighting, sit down, and just talk to each other. You know, you get backstory, and they talk about, you know, why they're fighting. But I understand why there isn't any in this film, because in war, sometimes there's just not enough time to do that. You're just more in the moment. However, after giving it a good amount of thought, like a lot of thought, I didn't like that aspect so much because it made it a lot more difficult to actually become attached to any of the characters. Performances were still exceptional though, and I can't give names for their characters because I don't know them, but I can tell you we get outstanding performances from actors such as Fionn Whitehead, who makes his film debut here, Mark Rylance, Kenneth Branagh, Tom Hardy. I don't know why I did that. And Harry Styles, with Rylance and surprisingly Styles giving the better performances, in my opinion. And I wasn't too surprised with Rylance. I mean, come on, he's an Oscar-winning actor. But Harry Styles, who we all know from One Direction? Let me tell you, this guy can act. And this is his film debut as well, and I was worried when I heard that he would actually be in the film, but I hardly recognized him in this. He seemed to actually disappear into the role. Even when my girlfriend leaned over and said, "That's Harry Styles," I saw it in his face, but just the way that he composed himself, I didn't see it. And when he spoke his first words, I could tell he wasn't trying. It didn't feel like he was trying to act. It felt like he was actually there. The script utilizes a storytelling method called fractured narrative, a non-linear style of storytelling, and one that Nolan has perfected in the past with his film Memento, and he has used many times in other films afterwards. Films like The Prestige, even Batman Begins. Dunkirk definitely has one of the best uses of this technique in the film, but it's for reasons that I will not actually say because it could potentially spoil certain plot points of the film. And as I mentioned earlier, the film is not about one character or even just multiple characters. This is solely about the evacuation of Dunkirk, and that's pretty rare, if not unique, for a war film. And as I've said, we don't get the cliche bits with the characters sitting down talking to each other and why they're fighting. And I do believe that this is a hindrance, but I also believe that it's not just for the characters, but it's a hindrance on the story itself. While the situation and the fighting helped pull me into the film, the lack of character-based scenes made it much harder to truly connect with everything that was going on. And the true emotional impact doesn't come from the viewer wanting specific characters to make it home. It comes from the viewer wanting every possible person, including the extras, to make it back home, as well as the entire spectacle that we're seeing on the screen. Like in Nolan's other films, he does his best to limit the amount of CGI in his films, and I'm pretty sure that no CGI was used. And actually, don't quote me on that. I may be wrong. There may be a few little bits, but I do know for a fact that they used real locations, boats, ships, and thousands upon thousands of extras to make this film feel more authentic. And not to mention the fact that one thing that war films tend to do is over-exaggerate certain things like gunfire and explosions. The planes didn't explode after being shot a few times unless it made natural sense. Like if something happened to cause it to make a big explosion, otherwise it wouldn't do that. And the gunfire didn't even look like gunfire that you would see in movies. Things like that help to make the film feel hyper-realistic and pretty terrifying. And again, this film, like every other Nolan film, is shot using regular film with IMAX lenses instead of being shot digitally, because he doesn't like that. He feels like you're losing a bit of something if you shoot it digitally. And It helps to increase the realism of everything that's occurring, and actually, it's shot in a way that makes you feel like you're there in the action suffering along with everybody else. And the dogfight scenes are especially riveting to watch, and I pointed this out in my previous Hacksaw Ridge review, that Hacksaw Ridge felt like a film that was shot in the 50s or 60s just with a much bigger budget. I felt the same way with this. There were even certain scenes that looked like old war films that I had seen that were made in the 60s and 70s. One thing that I absolutely loved about this film was the sound design. The explosions weren't always extravagantly loud unless the camera was pretty close to the actual blasts. And the gunfire, I swear, the gunfire was some of the most realistic sounding I've ever heard in a film. And the shots were so loud and realistic that each shot actually instilled me with dread. Of course, I do have one complaint about the sound design, and it has to do with the subtitle of this video, which, as you saw, is, "Can you please speak up?" And the reason why I made it that was because, as amazing as the general sounds were, it was very difficult to understand what the characters were saying most of the time, and it wasn't because of their accents. I know some people tend to have trouble understanding people with certain accents, especially British accents. I know my mother has that problem, but I'm not one of those people. No, the issue was that you could not hear most of what the characters were saying. You couldn't hear it at all. I could understand a fair amount because I forced myself to actually listen very intently, and because I'm fairly decent with lip reading. Now, for someone who is more hard of hearing, like my girlfriend, you'll absolutely have trouble understanding what's actually being said. The score for Dunkirk was composed by a regular collaborator of Nolan's, Hans Zimmer, and I've noticed that with Nolan films, Zimmer doesn't stick to the standard melodic or even classic score. His scores seem to be part of the sound design. A lot of the instrumentals used in the film, including the use of clockwork sounds in time with the music, are still stuck in my head, and probably will be for the next couple of weeks. I honestly think this is in the top 5 of greatest Hans Zimmerman scores. To recap, Dunkirk is a true war film, solely focusing on the To recap, Dunkirk is one of those true war films, solely focusing on the conflict, with little to no understanding of its characters and their motives, despite all over exceptional acting, an exceptionally simplistic plot using a non-linear form of storytelling, amazing visual and practical effects, Nolan's signature cinematography style, fantastic sound design with issues as far as the spoken voice, and another great Hans Zimmer score. Now, is this Nolan's best film? No, for me it's far from it. But even though I actually do consider this one of his lowest, but even his lowest film I still really enjoy. So, honestly, it's still a really good film, and I think everybody should check it out, especially if you have something like a Dolby Cinema at AMC, or if you have an IMAX. This is a movie that deserves to be seen on the big screen, and because of everything that I brought up, I'm going to give Dunkirk a 3.5 out of 5 reels. Thank you guys so much for watching and just listening to me ramble on and on. So, what did you guys think of Dunkirk? Did you love it? Hate it? You haven't seen it yet? Indifferent? What were its strengths? Its weaknesses? Please, leave your opinion in the comment section down below, because I want to know your thoughts. I welcome new perspectives. Be sure to subscribe if you have not already for more reviews and content. There is always more to come. And for other ways to help support the channel, please check out in the description down below. Thanks once again for watching, and farewell until the next video. Bye.